Well, thank you all for coming today. As we continue our study in the book of John. All right, last week we talked about some foundational things that John said in the first part of his prologue. And he makes, in John, in the first part of his prologue, makes 5 very foundational statements. The first is that Jesus was around before things existed. Jesus was with God as a separate, distinct personality. Jesus is God. Jesus created all things, and this is actually, he's using the word logos, not Jesus yet. Jesus created all things, emphasizes that to an important note on that one is that Jesus was not created. Jesus is life, the source of life, both physical and spiritual, and Jesus is light in the concept of good and evil. Now, to review a little bit about Greek thought and Jewish thought at this particular point in time, that will help us through the rest of today's lesson as we finish John's prologue, first 18 verses, and that is the concept of the Logos. And in Greek thought, Greeks had taken the whole concept of that there is something out there. There is something out there that is keeping the world from breaking into chaos. The sun sets at the same time. It follows a very normal path. Planets follow a predictable pattern. Seasons are predictable. And Greek thought was that there is something out there that holds all this together and that brings this predictability to nature. And they called that the Logos. Now, essentially, what they have done is they have identified one of the characteristics of God, and it just blanked on which characteristic that is. Omnipresent. Okay, we'll take omnipresent. But either way, but basically what the Greeks had done is that they had gravitated toward one particular aspect of God and had locked onto it and given it a name. So that's the Greeks' mindset when John uses the word logos all the way through this prologue. Now, the Jews have a thought about this as well. And the Jews go back all the way to Genesis 1, where they say, where God spoke and things happened. That God's word has power. God's word, creates things. And so that's in the back of the mind of Jewish thought when he uses this word logos. We're going to pick up in verse 9, actually. And so I just want to put that in the back of your brain as kind of a review before we carry on with the rest of this. Starting in verse 9, I'm going to read all the way through 18, and then we're going to come back and we're going to hit the verses, kind of pick them apart. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was created through him. Yet the world did not recognize him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, he gave them the right to be children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of natural descent, or of the will of the flesh, or the will of man, but of God. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We observed his glory, the glory as the one and only Son from the Father, full of truth and grace. I'm going to skip 15 because I'm going to handle John the Baptist in one entirety, and that's later. 16, indeed we have all received grace upon grace from his fullness. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the one and only Son, who is himself God and who is at the Father's side, has revealed him. Okay, let's go back up. Let's pick it apart. Because John, once again, makes some very important statements. One, going back up to verse 10, the world did not recognize him. Speaking globally as the world did not recognize him. And then John gets a little more specific in verse 11 when he says, he came to his own people, referring to the Jews, and they did not see who he was. Why did the Jews miss Jesus? Because he was a man? Okay. They were looking for an earthly ruler or a political leader. Okay. They did not understand the Scriptures. Okay. Or at least they did not understand all the Scriptures. Because Isaiah is the most famous for prophecies of the Christ. And you do have passages in Isaiah that would lead you to believe that he will be a military leader, that he will be a political leader. And then you also have passages in Isaiah, he is, by his stripes we are healed. And the sermon last Sunday was that the Pharisees had a real good head knowledge, but they weren't applying it. They didn't have it in their heart. But it is possible, yes, if you look through the prophecies of the Christ, it's real easy to come up with, especially if you are in a position where you are oppressed, and they're oppressed by the Romans. They don't like being oppressed by the Romans. Rome has occupied their area. They don't like this. This isn't fun for them. And unfortunately, we as humans tend to try and interpret Scripture based on our position and our need. If we have a certain need, we are more likely to see that answer when we read through particular verses. Any other thoughts on why the Jews? Any other thoughts on why the Jews did not catch Jesus when he came? Let's continue on. Verses 12 and 13. But to all who did receive him, he became the right to be children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of natural descent. Takes a nice little pot shot at the Jews right there. Because the Jews were all about lineage. The Jews were all about, if you are born a Jew, then you're good. What did Jesus say that one time? God can raise up descendants of Abraham from these rocks. Who were not born of natural descent, nor will of the flesh, nor will of man, but of God. Easy question. How do we become children of God? It's right there in 12. Believing. Notice that John does not add anything to this. He doesn't say believing and attend church 3 out of 4 Sundays. He doesn't say, believing and keep the law. He doesn't add anything to that. He says believe. 13, it's not because of your lineage, it's not because where you were born, it is you were born from God because you believed. Okay. In verse 14, John drops another bomb. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Now for the Greeks, this is like, no way, this isn't going to happen. They believe in immanence is the word. They believe that they've taken this concept of the immanence of God, who holds all things together. They've put a name on it. They call it the Logos. And for them to consider that this took on flesh is beyond what they would consider thinking. Okay, this is like blowing their minds. In fact, probably a fair amount of Greeks would probably put this down at this particular point in time and say, no way that could happen. The Jews are going to struggle with this too. And not so much that God became flesh, but the Jews hold God in such esteem, so much more than we do, that the concept of God becoming flesh is probably a little far-fetched. What came to mind when I was preparing this was a couple stories, one of which comes out of 1 Samuel. The Ark of the Covenant has been captured, hangs out in Philistine territory for a while. Philistines are all getting sick. They send it back to Jerusalem, or they send it back, not to Jerusalem, they send it back to Israel on a cart. And the cart's going along and hits a bump, and a guy reaches out, touches the cart, and dies immediately. Okay? That's the concept of how pure and how holy and how separate God is for them. They won't even speak his name. That's why there is no vowels in the word Yahweh. We're the ones that put vowels into it. They don't even want to speak his name because they might say it wrong. That's the whole concept they have of God, that God is that separate, that holy, and that, separate and holy. How else do you say it? And so for the Jews to say, he became flesh, is a pretty bold statement for them. It's a real bold statement for them. Let's just say that. The Word became flesh and dwelt or tabernacled among us. Kind of an interesting reference there. The word tabernacle brings back the concept of when the Ark of the Covenant was being moved around out in the wilderness. We remember that, the wilderness wanderings. They had their tabernacle set up. In fact, actually, the Ark of the Covenant dwelled in the tabernacle until Solomon's day when he finally got a temple. So, this is, as I said, that is a very bold statement by John. We observed his glory. John's statement, we observed it, we saw it, we witnessed it. I saw it, it was there. Grace and truth. Curiously enough, John does not use the word grace the rest of his letter. He uses it 4 times right here in the beginning. And truth. He is truth. God is not just truthful. He is the embodiment of truth. 17. The law came through Moses, grace through Jesus. Who does that sound like?
Say that again.
The law came through, 17. The law was given through Moses, grace came through Jesus Christ. Who does that sound like? Paul? That's Paul's writings.
Paul.
That sounds a lot like Paul. Yeah, sorry. Who else wrote that kind of statement? Yeah. Paul did. And also in 17, he finally ties who this flesh person is to his whole statement. He hadn't mentioned Jesus the whole time. And he finally mentions it in 17. The law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Okay, there's another bombshell for you. 18. No one has ever seen God. I remember that recalled to my mind the story in Exodus. Moses is up on the mountain, tells God, I want to see your face. And God says, nobody can see my face and live. No human can see my face and live. We observed his glory, we saw it, we witnessed grace and truth. Okay, no one can see my face and live. That came out of Exodus 33. Now, we run into some interesting things, and we're going to see some differences in translations on this next one. No one has ever seen God, the one and only Son. Some of your translations will have this next phrase, some of them will not. Who is himself God, and is at the Father's side. He has revealed him. NIV, CSB, Mounts, Net, all will use that one phrase, he himself is God. You will not find it in King James. Some of the other ones don't have it. It depends on which one you're looking at. So I went and did a little bit of research on why that appears in some and not in others, and got into the deep weeds so fast. Well, it wasn't even weeds. That was a bamboo forest, okay? Let's just say that one got real complicated real fast. It had to do with Greek grammar in terms of modifying and participles and adjectives and the order it's written in. It was really complicated, and if you ever want to go read it, I will point you to that source, and you can go in and you can figure it out. However, some very good translations use that phrase, he himself. Now, it's actually not unique because John early on in the first statement made the same thing that Jesus, his third statement was, Logos is God. So he says it again, or at least we believe he says it again. He himself is God and is at the Father's side. He has revealed him, as in Jesus has revealed him. Now this starts talking about the incarnation, and this brought up, and we talked about the incarnation before. But this brought up an interesting thought in my brain, and so I kind of ran down a few paths. The other three Gospels never bring up the concept of the incarnation. I found that rather curious, and I got to looking at that. Curiously enough, the concept of the incarnation really only shows up, I could find, in one other place in the New Testament. So is this just a John thing? Because John is the one who actually brings the concept of the incarnation to us more than anybody else. You see phrases later in John such as I and the Father are one. You see John's I am statement in chapter 8. So is the incarnation just a John thing? We'll check Bible knowledge here. Does anyone want to take a stab at where it appears in the New Testament in Paul's writings? Philippians 2:6. He's actually quoting a song or a poem, we don't really know. Speaking of Jesus, who, as he already existed in the form of God, did not consider equality God with something to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant and being born in the likeness of men. We all know the passage right there at the beginning. He existed in the form of God. So, why do we believe in the incarnation if the only place we see it is in John? John is the one who really brings that whole concept.
Brings it home.
Yeah,
Right.
John talks about the incarnation more than anybody else.
Right.
In fact, he's about the only one who talks about the incarnation.
Right.
I found one Old Testament prophecy that talks about the incarnation. Ginger already knows the answer. I already told her the answer. There it is. Isaiah 6. For a child is born to us, a son will be given to us, the government will be on his shoulder, he'll be named Wonderful Counselor. What? Mighty God. Next phrase, Everlasting Father, or Eternal Father, depending upon your translation, Prince of Peace. The only other place I could find, that's the only Old Testament prophecy I could find that talks about the incarnation. So we've got John, who talks about it a lot. We've got a piece here in Isaiah, we got a piece here in Philippians. But why else do we believe in the incarnation? Now, those of you who were here on week 2 of Christology, you should know this answer. You can go back and look at your notes if you really want to. Because remember, the church did not adopt officially that Jesus was deity until about 240 AD. Because they struggled with it. They couldn't figure out how Jesus and God related. One of the main reasons why that we came up with, or one of the reasons that they came up with it and we agree with, is that Jesus did godlike things. He was, he could heal, and we see healings in other places. He raised from the dead. Yes, Elijah raised someone from the dead. He changed the weather. We didn't see that anywhere else. He manipulated, multiplied loaves and fishes. He forgave sin. Only God can forgive sins.
But did Peter say you are?
But either way, the point is that that's where we get the majority of our theology on the incarnation is from the Gospel of John.
Yeah.
But we do have a couple other places that help back that up. So it's not just John coming up with this bright idea in his head. Now, someday I'll find out the answer to the question, probably when I get to heaven, why the other gospel writers didn't write down some of the stuff that John did. John has like John 8, that's probably one of the biggest ones to me. But why didn't anyone else write that down?
That's a big deal.
Well, it is a big deal. And why they didn't write it down? Was it too controversial for them to do at the time? They had to think through it? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. But either way, let's wrap that up. So in this particular passage, and as we wrap up the beginning of the prologue of John 1, he makes three big statements. Those who believed could become children of God. I did use the word could become on that for you.
I saw that.
That they could become children of God. That is a potential for them to do. So it's not based on lineage like it was when you were a Jew. You had to be born to being a Jew, or it's a little tough to be converted into one. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Now, that's nothing new to us, but that's rather novel for them at this particular time, that this would come down and join us and be a part of us. And he associates the whole concept of the Word, the Logos, with Jesus. And those are his big statements. They're nothing new for us today, but they're very foundational. And as I said, know why you believe what you believe.